All right, it's 5 minutes after the hour, and I think we're going to get ready. So let me just do a little head count here. Actually, let's just for fun do what we have done in the past, which is if you could turn on your camera and make sure that your headset is all set, and we'll do a little roll call here, and we'll start with William, since I can see William. Just say hello, William, and how are you today?
Hello, how are you?
Excellent.
Yes,
Very
I'm
good.
okay. Yes.
And how about Mr. Emerson Nevis? Emerson, can you hear us? Okay, Emerson seems to be having some technical difficulties, so we'll move on to Joy. Hi, Emerson, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Good to see you.
Now you can hear me.
I can hear you and I can see you in all your glory. So thank you. Thank you very much. Obrigado. How about Joy? Oh,
hello?
Emerson, can you hear me? Sorry, Joy, stand by. Emerson, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Maybe. He can hear you.
He can hear me. Good. He should answer me if he can hear me.
yeah.
Hi, Alavo. Good to see you too. Okay, so far we have William, Alavo, and Emerson, and now let's hear from Joy. Hello, Joy.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
How's things in Manila? Hot?
Very.
You look a little hot.
Yeah.
All right.
Very hot.
And now we zoom back to Africa to the Rift Valley. Lillian, can you hear us? Good afternoon, Lillian. Lillian's getting her microphone adjusted. So we'll wait for Lillian, and then we'll go on to, oh, that's it. Oh, Victor. Victor has joined us. Good afternoon, Victor. How are you?
How are you? Hello, everyone.
Good to hear from you. Good to see you. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So the only one we haven't heard from is Lillian. I think she's still struggling with her technology. Lillian, if you can hear us, let us know. Good. All right. Well, so welcome to Module 4, Data Definitions and Data Collection. Today, we're going to have Andrew Majama be our facilitator for the conversation. Hugh is with us as well, fresh back from Vanuatu. And is that how you say it, Hugh? Is that correct way of pronouncing it? Hopefully it is. So, we are in pretty good shape. People are starting to catch up. We've had some challenges. Some people who haven't been connected for a long time are finally connecting, and they're not with us today, but hopefully they'll be listening to this recording in a day or two. We're more than halfway through the course. We still have another 4 weeks to go, 4 to 5 weeks, and but we need everybody to really pay attention now, because as I have explained in the past, is the complexity of the concepts that we're covering, and the pace of the course kind of picks up as we get into it. We wanted to ease you in so you'd have a good framework for understanding. And now when we start doing data entry, then we start getting into the more complex parts of the SAVIC. So thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to turn this over to Andrew. Maybe we lost Andrew. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Where'd you know it? We lost Andrew.
I don't see him on screen. Yeah.
Yep. Hopefully his connection will come back. Otherwise, we'll have to press Hugh back into action.
Oh, God.
Looks like you're ready, Hugh.
Sorry?
I said, looks like you're ready. If need be, you're...
Okay, give him a second or two. And because...
Let me Skype text him.
We have two Lillian's tablets showing on the screen.
Yeah, one may be her phone and one may be her
Ah, okay.
laptop, tablet. I haven't been able to hear her voice. I'm not sure if she can hear us yet. And folks, just so you are reminded that if you look in your bottom navigation bar, there's a chat box, and if you click on the chat box, you can go in there and you can type something. I just typed hello, and you'll see it pop up. And in that chat box, you can either send a message to everybody, or you can send a message to an individual participant of the webinar. So just keep that in mind if you want to add anything or say anything. Well, Hugh, you might have to pick it up.
Okay. As luck would have it, I have it ready. Let's hope we don't go through the usual nonsense of which screen to show it on. Right. Data action definitions. Here we are. Okay. Right. Well, I'll take it away right now. If Andrew comes back in, I'll drop out and he can come back in. Okay.
All right. Let's share your screen.
Before we get started, let's just review a little bit where we come from. At the first webinar, we were looking at architecture, and we completed that. Then we were looking at setup. Now, many of you have already completed setup, and you've been liaising with Andrew on this. And I gather all but 2 of you have managed to complete setup to some extent or another. There was some confusion in that some of you used your own personal email instead of the email that was assigned to you. But I believe that Andrew has sorted that out. When he comes back on, we'll maybe discuss that. But what you've done basically is you went through the process of setting up as the MIS administrator, which basically meant that you put all the details about the project, its budget, and you assign usernames and passwords for the administrator, the project administrator, and also the data entry officer. And then we switched over to the project administrator, and the project administrator set up the table of trainers, okay, which was including supervisors, field officers, and village agents. So that table of trainers was all set up. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, you're actually ready to enter data into the system. But before you can do that, you have to gather data. Now, so we're not really talking here about the software at the moment. You can forget about the software and you can think about pencil and paper. We do have an application, a mobile phone-based application for collecting data, but we don't recommend that you use it immediately, because if you use a mobile application, data is entered usually by field officers, and that means it doesn't get scrutinized by a supervisor. So until you're really confident that people really are on top of data collection and the terms that we use, we recommend that you use paper and pencil. So this particular webinar is all about paper and pencil approaches to collecting data. Okay, so we're going to go through that in this particular webinar, and you're going to have a discussion after the webinar on data collection. We've got an exercise for you on that, and then in a week's time, same time, I'm going to actually run you through the process of entering data. After which there will be an exercise in which you enter data on 18 different groups. Okay. So for the moment, what I'm going to do is switch to PowerPoint, and let's see if we can make it work this time without too many problems. That's the one I want. Okay. Now I think everybody can see my screen, but what's going to happen is I think it's going to change because PowerPoint has got all clever now. We have 2 screens instead of 1. And I just have to be sure that it's going to work properly. Hold on. Yes, indeed. Now I have to switch screens like we did last week. Remember, I got lost on that one. All right, swap present. Okay, here we go. All right, now slide number 1.
Looks good, Hugh.
Okay, it looks good, does it? Okay. Right, so this is Module 4, Data Definitions and Data Collection. Now, the thing I need to point out to you is that everybody sort of thinks that setting up an MIS is all about the electronics and the software and making sure that, you know, everybody understands what their role is. But in fact, the biggest challenge with MIS, accurate and useful information coming out of an MIS, is data quality. You will find, no matter how carefully you train people, that it will take you about 3 months before you start getting good data coming in from your field officers, and only if you have scrutinized that data before it goes into the system. Okay, so you will all have, we set up the Module 4 extract from the training guide, and that focuses strictly upon data definitions and data collection. So we're going to start off with that. And let's go to the first slide. Okay. When data should be collected for the SAVIX MIS and what it can tell us. Now, when data should be collected. Now, a lot of people think, oh, I've got an MIS, so I'm going to collect data every month. Now, that really isn't a good idea. And the reason for that is if you're collecting data every month, you're not really seeing significant changes from one month to the next. You are quadrupling, you are adding a whole bunch of the burden of labor on people who've got to enter the data. You are going to have a huge amount of data for analysis, and that becomes something that gets to be a bit complicated. And what we found is when data is collected monthly, it may get entered, but it very rarely gets analyzed. So what we recommend is the following. If you look at this chart here, you will see that it's the normal, this is the 9-month minimum cycle. It's normally 12 months. And the red circles are showing when we think you should be collecting data from the group. We don't see much point in collecting data from the group when the group is registered, because the only information you're going to get is the group's name and the number of members, nothing much else. They're going to start saving on the 3rd training, which is at the end of the 1st week. And then they're going to save again, and save again. But here in the 4th week, they are going to be dispersing their first loan. And what we recommend is that you can collect data from the 4th training meeting onwards, or you could wait until the 1st loan repayment. But the fourth meeting is fine, okay, because by that time you will have quite a bit of information on savings, and you will have got your first loans going out, so you'll have some sense of what the demand is for credit. Okay, so let me just push this up here. It's basically here, this is baseline data collected at first loan in the 4th week. You have limited financial information except savings, okay? Now, the next time you would collect data is at the end of the 1st cycle. That's it's indicative of financial performance. You've had let me see, from here you've had, this is your first loan repayment. So you've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loan repayments out here. So you're beginning to get fairly interesting data on loan performance, but by now the trends in terms of savings are becoming very clear. Now here you're 6 months into the cycle, you're only visiting monthly, and you're beginning to get some very reliable medium-term financial performance in terms of savings, loans, and returns, and you're beginning to get a sense of how this group is likely to perform by the end of the cycle. And you'll notice that all of these data collection activities take place at the end of the meeting, okay? Now, if I go here, this is the end of the cycle. Now it's either at this point, which is 9 months, or it's at 12 months later on. And 9 times out of 10, remember, you will be doing 1 year. But I didn't want to stuff 52 weeks onto one page, and I've terminated it here at 9 months, which is the earliest that a group would share out. So what are you getting here? First of all, you are not collecting data at the end of the meeting. You're collecting it just before the money is shared out. Because if you wait to the end of the meeting, all you're going to get is a lot of zeros. Whoops, pardon me, something happened there. Let me go back. How do I do that? Oh, come on. Oh, wait a minute. Here we are. Oh, I'm trying to turn it back, but it doesn't. Oh, here we are. Okay. Okay. So at this particular point, the reason why you collect the data just before the money is shared out is so that you get a full picture of the financial performance. This is possibly the most important data collection point, because this is not a projection. This is not, a halfway measure or a 1/3 way measure. This is what actually happened by the end of the cycle. It's real. Okay, everything else is guesswork, projections, speculation, trend analysis, but this is what happened. So it reflects the final result. You know how much people have saved, and you know what kind of profit they made on savings, okay? So this is really important to determine the effectiveness of the program. So normally in a cycle, you would have 5 data collection events, one here, one here, one here, one here, and finally at 12 months. Are you clear about why I'm showing it at 9 months and not at 12 months? I hope so. You still collected at 9 months, but you wouldn't have the share out, that's all, but at 12 months you would. Okay, and it says at the bottom here, note, a cycle will normally continue for 52 weeks, in which case data will be collected one more time. Okay, so instead of collecting it monthly, which would mean 12, or actually it would mean 13 data collection events, there are 5 data collection events spaced out on a quarterly basis. If you do it on a quarterly basis, you're beginning to get the data collection work is not going to overwhelm your job as a field officer. Your job as a field officer is to train groups and to supervise them. It's not to be an enumerator. So by spreading it out, having it only once every 3 months, you focus on your principal task, which is supervising the groups. And it also means that the project administrator will be in a better position, because they've got more time and they've got less data, to analyze it meaningfully for quarterly meetings of project staff. Okay, so this is the frequency of data collection that we recommend. If you've got any questions on that, you can ask them right now. Or you can put it into the sidebar and Bill will tell me, I hope, what the questions are.
Any questions, anybody? My assumption is that if there are no questions, it's clear.
Okay, then we move on. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the basic data collection. That seems to have a life of its own. The basic data collection forms. These are the minimum data collection forms that you need to operate the system. We have data collection forms which are the minimum, but if you wish to, at a later point, you can add user-defined data, okay? But what we're going to show you today is the minimum data that you must collect, okay? Okay, so we have what we call static data, okay? Now we call it static because we collect it only once in the lifetime of a group. We don't need to collect it more than once because it never changes. So for example, the name of the group, okay, and the number of members when the group was formed, these are data, and the date on which the group was formed. the name of the group, date it was formed, and the number of members is all we collect, but we only collect it once. And it's called static because it should not change. Then we have what we call cycle data. Now, these are data that are collected at the start of each cycle. It isn't collected at every meeting, but if you have a cycle normally lasts 1 year, okay? That's, you start out a cycle, you do your savings and your credit, and at the end of the year, you share out. So from the beginning of the annual cycle to the time you share out is considered a cycle, and you collect data at the start of the cycle, okay? It's not collected again until the start of the next cycle, okay? But you do collect it once during the cycle. And then finally, we have what we call regular data or standard data. This is data that is always collected from a group at least once in a quarter. This doesn't mean that you collect it every time you go to a group. It means you do it once a quarter. So if you're visiting the group monthly, well, you'd have 3 meetings which you attend, and in only one of them would you collect data. And by the way, you will be collecting data in terms of how the group is evolving. You're not saying, oh, we're going to collect it in January, in April, July, October, for the whole program. No, because you're following a process of data collection which is geared to the stage of development of the group. Okay? And this is really helpful because it means that way data is flowing in regularly rather in bunches every 3 months. Okay? So when we say it's collected at least once in a quarter, that means a quarter in terms of the group's development. As we showed you on this previous table here, we're talking about when the group reaches this point, when it reaches this point, when it reaches this point, and when it reaches this point. Not when a program has reached January, April, July, October, and so on. Right, now let's go on and let's actually look at the basic data collection forms. Okay, now this is what an example of static data. Okay, you have the group name and you have the name of the person who trained it. Okay, and you have the date of the first training and the number of members. Now, when we say number of members at creation of group, that basically means the same thing as and that's basically the number of members when you did your first training. They're basically, you had a training on this date, and how many members were there when you did this first training? Because we're assuming that the first training is effectively at the point at which the group was created as a savings group. Now you'll notice that there are, in addition to that, there are 2 GPS data that you have latitude and you have longitude, and these I've expressed it here in decimal format, which is a standard GPS format. But we are, and I want you to hear me very carefully on this. I've shown it to you here, but we do not recommend, if you're collecting data with paper, that you put these data in. And the reason for that is very often people make errors. Instead of noticing that the group should be to the east of the prime meridian, they let it default to west, and you find half of your groups are in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And it's easy to make a typographical mistake when you're typing in these numbers, especially if you're in the field and the sun is shining brightly. We recommend that you confine latitude and longitude or GPS data collection to situations in which you're using the mobile application. I'm not covering that in this webinar, but I would recommend that if you're collecting with paper, you do not collect latitude and longitude data. All right, next. Now we're going to be looking at the data collection form. It's a bit difficult for you to see this because I've got the whole form on one page, but that doesn't matter. We had the static data. Now I'm going to show you the cycle data. That's here. Okay, it says the cycle number, date savings started this cycle, group status, which is going to be supervised or self-managed at start of cycle, groups supervised by, and you have the name of the trainer, and you have registered members when savings started the cycle, savings reinvested at the start of each cycle, and what is it? Property at start of cycle. So you'll notice that the wording itself should be your guide, because the wording says at start of cycle, at start of cycle. It doesn't say in the middle of the cycle. It doesn't say at the end of the cycle. It says at the start of the cycle. So that means it will not change, because what was at the start of the cycle was at the start of the cycle. The only thing that might possibly change is the name of the person supervising the group. Okay, so that's what we call your cycle data. Then we come on to your standard data. So this is cycle data collected at the start of each cycle. Then you have here your standard data, okay? All right, now this is data collection, number of registered members now, number of registered women now, number of members attending the meeting, dropouts this cycle, value of savings this cycle, value of loans outstanding, number of loans outstanding, write-offs this cycle, loan fund cash in box, bank balance, social fund balance, property now, external debts, dividends paid this cycle, and a question, is this an end of cycle share out meeting? So these data here are the data you will always collect when you make a data, when you visit to collect data. So you will do this 5 times in a year is what you will fill out. Okay, so here we have that. Standard data collected regularly, usually every quarter. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll notice these 2 columns. Okay, now these are what I call worksheets. Because here you see you have the number of members, it goes down to 25. And this says shares per member this cycle. And this says value of loans outstanding. And this is for each member. So you're recording each member's savings here, and you're recording each member's loans outstanding. Okay, and at the bottom it says price of a share, and then it says total savings. So you're multiplying the total here by the value of the share, and you're putting it here, and then you're transferring this total savings to value of savings this cycle, and you're transferring this figure, which is value of loans outstanding, to here, and you're transferring, or you're copying, you're noting the number of loans, and you're transferring that to here. Okay, so this is just a worksheet. Okay, and finally, you have down here on the bottom, you have what we call a profitability calculation, which is basically taking data that you have already entered in here and calculating profit. And this is really useful because it means that when you're in the field, instead of just being there to get data, you are in a position to tell the group how much money they're making, or you're in a position to discover whether or not they're losing money. And if it looks as if the result is crazy, like the profit is huge, or if the losses, you've got losses, maybe you then go back in and recheck your data. Okay, so this is the layout of the collection form. Now, do you have any questions about this before I move on? Notice, by the way, this says value of loans outstanding, which you bring from here, plus loan fund cash in box, and you've got loan fund cash in box here, and you've got bank balance here, and you've got bank balance here. So it's a question of just copying them down, and then you have how it's done is shown here. It says value of loans outstanding plus loan fund cash in box plus bank balance plus property now minus value of savings this cycle minus property at start of cycle minus external debts equals profit or loss. Okay. Now on my screen, I can't see the bottom of this particular slide, even though it shows on the other screen. I hope you can see those last 2 lines, which read minus external debts and profit results, profit or loss to date. Okay, so that's basically the layout of the data collection form. So now what we want to do is we want to go through and we want to make sure that you understand the definitions clearly. So let's move on. Here you see the form filled out. Okay. Okay, so here you can see I've got number of shares of each member, and you'll see there are 15 members. Okay. Then you'll see that, and they've saved 293 shares at 1,000 shillings a share. That's 293,000. So I transfer that up to here. Then I've got value of loans outstanding at 270,000, and I transfer that to here. And then I count the number of loans: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I write 10 here. And then here you'll notice it says, is this an end of cycle share meeting? And we've simply circled that with a no. Okay, but this is a filled out data collection form. So now we can come back to that later if you want to review it again. It's a bit small on your screens, I'm sure. But we will, this is actually also showing in the section of the manual that we have posted to Module 4 of Canvas, okay? So you go to Module 4, and you should see this already, just this part showing what the data collection forms look like, and then the definition of terms. But I'm going to go through them.
Hugh.
Yep.
Excuse me, Hugh. It's also the file we attached actually on an email just yesterday. So, and we had requested them to actually print out this page, this filled out data collection form. So everything is.
Everything should be, and it's got this same image on it. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Let's carry on. Now.
I do have a quick
Yes?
question on that. Would you mind just describing a little bit more on the right side where there's the loans? Is that per member? And then I guess at every data collection point, you count how much is outstanding loans for that
That's right.
cycle? Okay.
That's right. What you're doing, I mean, it depends on what methodology you're using, but if you're using passbooks, basically, you don't have a ledger, so you don't have any kind of aggregation of savings or loan information. So what you're doing here is you're looking at each individual person's passbook and you're recording the balance of their loan outstanding, which is on the right-hand column. And on the left-hand column, you're reporting the number of shares they've bought. If you're not using passbooks and you're using ledgers, the left-hand column, instead of being shares, can simply be the amount that they have saved. And you could ignore the table at the bottom, which says value of one share. Okay?
A couple of questions in the sidebar regarding understanding the meaning of property, i.e. property at the start of the cycle.
We're going to be covering that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's move on now, and let's talk about the types of data in the SAVEX MIS and definitions. All right, so this is data that is collected when the group is first formed. Group name. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Then we have group trained by. So this is the name of the person who trained the group. It could be a field officer, or it could be a village agent. But they must be somebody whose name has already been registered in the system as a trainer, either as a field officer or a village agent. If you've got a new village agent and the name is not registered in the system, you will not find it when you enter. So once you hire a new village agent or you employ a new field officer, then you must put their name into the system. Then we have data first training. This is the date the group received its first training as an SG, as a savings group. Now, let me explain that, what I mean by that. It could be, for example, that you're working with a farmers group, okay? And the farmers group has existed for a long time. Now, we're not talking about the date the group was first trained as a farmers group. We're talking about you've come there, they want to include savings and credit activities. So it's the day they received their first training to be able to do savings and credit, even though they may have been there 10 years. Next, number of members at the creation of group. That's basically the number of members at the date of first training or at the start of the first cycle. It's the same thing, really. So sometimes there's a bit of confusion between these two, but basically it means number of members on the date of first training. And then we have latitude and longitude, and I've already discussed that. It is better, should not normally be collected. It is better to do this using the SAVIX data application because this reduces errors. But only after the project is well established and the quality of other data is confirmed to be high. Now, the reason for that is if you have a handheld device and you enter data into the system, it's very often the case that it never gets looked at by a supervisor. But if it's in paper form, when it gets passed to the supervisor's desk, the supervisor can have a good look at it before it gets passed on to the person who's entering the data. Okay, right. So that is what we call static data. Okay. And note that these data never change unless a mistake has been made. Right, now here we have data collected. Notice the emphasis at the start of each cycle. So every cycle is given a new number after the previous cycle share out. So you come to the end of the first cycle, you've shared out. You're going to carry on to the next cycle, that's cycle number 2. You go through the whole of cycle number 2, you do another share out, you start cycle number 3, and so on and so forth. Sometimes we found that people, because they got used to and not entering cycle data after they've done it one time, they sometimes forget to update it when they change to a new cycle. So be aware that if it is a new cycle, you must change the cycle number and the data that is there. Then date savings started, the date when people started savings money at the start of this cycle. Okay, so when was it? It doesn't matter. I want to know the date when they started savings. Then group status. Now, we have two types of status. The group is either supervised or self-managed. Now, supervised means that it's receiving technical support. It's not ready to be independent. Okay, so the program has not yet, the group has not yet completed its first cycle, and the trainer has determined, and possibly also the supervisor, that it still needs further training. Okay, now self-managed means that the group is managing itself. In other words, it means that it is no longer receiving training. It is no longer having a field officer come to check up on them before considering the group ready to be independent. So once a group is independent, it may never receive another visit from a project. It might do, but it's still self-managed if the project has considered that it's ready to work completely on its own. And that usually takes place after 12 or 13 months. And group monitored by. Now, notice we're not saying group supervised by, we're saying monitored by, because during the time the group is supervised, the field officer is collecting data, so it is still monitoring the data. And if the group is independent, and maybe you've decided you want to track it for the long term, the person who is tracking it is monitoring it. So in both cases, it's being monitored, okay? And that's why we use the word, because we don't want to say supervised by, because it could be the group is supervised, it could be that it is independent. So particularly in the case of projects that decide they're going to select a sample of groups and track them for the long term, then whoever goes to collect the data is monitoring the group, even though it is independent. Okay. Next. Registered members. That's actually easy. It's the number of people whom the group said were members at the start of each cycle, number of past books that you've got or registered in the ledger. And then savings reinvested at start of cycle. Okay. This is the total amount of money carried over by members from the previous cycle. Now, this is not going to be something that gets filled in the first cycle. But you come to the end of the cycle, you've done the share out, and then some members decide they want to put their money back into the group at the beginning of the next cycle. So they're basically it's like a rollover. The money is being reinvested by those members at the start of the cycle. And it is the one occasion during the cycle when they can buy more than 5 shares. Okay? And this is increasingly common with groups, but it won't happen in the first cycle, but it could happen in all subsequent cycles. Now, property at start of cycle. First of all, we're talking about physical property. We're talking about tables, chairs, mats, livestock, agricultural products, agricultural tools, you name it. Anything the group, as a savings group, not as a historical group, but as a savings group, has acquired as a result of its savings group activities. So sometimes you will find that a group decides that they've got spare money in their loan fund, so they spend a bit of it to buy a few chairs. Okay, so that's their property. Maybe the group is halfway through the cycle, everybody has got a loan, but they've got a lot of money in the box, so they decide they're going to buy a few bags of grain, like maize, at the time of harvest, which they're going to put in store and sell later on. It's whatever is physical property that the group as a savings group has bought according to its purchase price. Now that's a key point. You aren't talking about what the value of that property might be now, or it might, because it could have appreciated, it could have depreciated. You're talking about what you paid for it at the start of the cycle. So that's basically your cycle data. Any questions on cycle data? Anything in the sidebar? I can't see it here.
Yes, Lillian is asking the question about saving reinvest. It says about saving reinvested, does one enter cumulative amount reinvested?
Well, normally what we're talking about is it happens once during a cycle. Let me explain. Normally the way this works is you get to the end of the cycle and you have your share out meeting. And in that meeting, in that one meeting, you're saying, okay, you can reinvest as much as you like. Okay? And they reinvest one time. Okay? And that's it. So, for example, normally the limit on the number of shares you can buy is 5. Okay? But on this one occasion, at the end of the last cycle, you've got your money, you can reinvest as much as you like, and you record that as the number of shares bought reinvested at the start of the cycle. So and notice what it says. It doesn't say reinvested cumulatively. It says at start of cycle. It is a fixed point in time. It is not a cumulative thing. It's a one-time activity that is done in the last meeting in the share out meeting of the first of the cycle.
And the assumption there, Hugh, is that when they were doing their share out, everybody essentially collected all their money. So that
that's
when
right.
they decide,
That's correct. We're assuming that you get to the end of the cycle and you do a share out. Okay, so everybody's got their money in their hand and they're free to go. They can leave the group, they can stay in the group, but keep all the money. But some members, in fact, usually quite a lot, will say, oh, this was really good. We made 20% profit. Let me put my money back into the group at this point. Okay.
Hugh, there's a question from Victor. Is the kit part of the property at the start of the cycle?
Okay, this is a bit tricky. We generally speaking recommend you don't include it because very often the kit is bought with, it depends how the group got it. Sometimes it is a donation. If it's a donation and you put the price in, it will increase the profitability of the group. If the group pays for it with other kinds of contributions, maybe some groups contribute before they started saving to buy the box, then it confuses the whole system. So generally speaking, all physical property is counted except for the box. Any other question?
Many of our groups have group businesses. Would you put that in the assets at the beginning of the cycle, or would you do a user-defined field to help manage them?
Well, okay, now the thing is, when you say group businesses, are you talking about savings groups that have started businesses?
Yes.
And the source of capital for those businesses is what would normally be the loan fund. Is that right? Instead of being given out in loans, the money is being used to make some investment. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay, fine. So in that case, you include any assets that the group has invested in, the value of any assets that have been bought. Okay.
So you're
Normally
only
this-
collecting that once a cycle. You're not
Sorry?
You're not you
Well,
only
no, hold
collect
on a
that once a
second.
cycle.
Hold on a second. Because this is cycle data and it says at start of cycle. Later on, we have property now, which allows you to enter the value of property at the time of data collection. This is at the start of the cycle. And we do it at the start of the cycle, and we do it whenever you're collecting data, because that shows us change in value. Okay? Because let's say you start off with a property of $500, and then later on in the cycle, you've got property of $750. We know that the property value has increased by $250, right? And we're measuring that. Okay. Any other questions? Right. These data will not change during the cycle and need only be collected once. By the way, let me ask you, can you see that full sentence? Can you see the word once? Because on my screen, I can't.
Actually, it's not visible here.
Okay, well, yeah, because it is on the one screen, but not on the other, so that's a bit misleading. Okay, so let's be clear about that. This last sentence says, these data will not change during the cycle and need only be collected once. On the PDF of the PowerPoint, it does show fully. Okay. Right now we've done the static data and we've done the cycle data. So now we're moving on to the regular data, or standard data, as some people call it. Now this is data, as we pointed out already, that is collected usually monthly, every quarter. So member information, that's the first category. Date of data collection. Now that's pretty straightforward. It means when you went to the group and collected the most recent data. Then you have number of registered members now. Okay, so it could be that the number of members has changed since the beginning of the cycle. So you started off with 20, you're 22 now, or you started off with 20, you're 19 now. Number of registered women, okay? So that's, I think, pretty straightforward. At the time, again, it's at the time of data collection. Then we have number of members attending this meeting. I think that's self-explanatory. Then we have dropouts. Now, a dropout. This could be any members who've left the group for any reason. They could have died. They could have gone and taken a job in Dubai. They could have been thrown into prison. They may have left just because they don't want to be a member of the group anymore. It doesn't matter what the reason is. Dropout is somebody who has left the group permanently, not just for a month or two. They have permanently left the group for any reason. Okay? Now, by the way, I should point out that very often this is where errors creep in, because we have number of registered members, we have number of members at start of cycle. Let me go back. Okay, we have registered members when savings started this cycle. Then we have number of registered members now. Okay, now let's supposing we started off with 20 and we are 18 now, then clearly the dropouts must be at least 2 people, but could be more. Because you could have started off with 20, you could have gone down to 18, okay, but 3 people could have left the group, because although 3 people left, 1 other person joined. You don't have to do the mathematics. You don't have to try and worry about the logic. You're simply saying how many people left the group since it started this cycle. But sometimes we find people put cycle data, they say number of members at start of cycle 20, number of registered members now 18, dropouts this cycle 0. Well, the system will not accept that data because it's not logical. It cannot be true. Now, loans and savings, that's the next category. Value of savings this cycle. This is the total cumulative net value of all savings to date for the cycle. So it depends on your methodology, but some methodologies allow people not only to save, but to withdraw their money. Okay, so somebody could have saved 10,000, but withdrawn 2,000. So that means their cumulative net savings is 8,000. Okay? It's just like when you have a savings account in a bank, whatever your current balance is your net value of all savings, including contributions and withdrawals. Value of loans outstanding, total value of balance of loans not yet repaid, whether on time or late. Now, we want to watch it a bit here. Total value of balance of loans not yet repaid. In other words, you took a loan out for 1,000, okay, and you decided that you've paid off 800, so you have a balance of 2,000, okay. And we say excluding interest, so that you're talking about the principal sum. And the number of loans outstanding, I think that's pretty clear. It's the total number of loans that have not yet been repaid in full. Please be clear about loans outstanding. Loans outstanding does not mean that a loan is late. It is whatever remains unpaid, whether it's on time or late, it doesn't matter. What is owing to the group? And then the number.
Let me just add a question to that. This statement excluding interest, because it's interest that is currently owing, isn't it? Because previously the loan that has been the money that has been loaned out include previous interest that was already paid. So it's the interest that's not counted is the current interest, right?
Well, yes, if you're charging interest monthly. I was in two minds as to whether to leave this in, because we've now developed a new model in which interest is added to the loan right at the beginning of the cycle, and then you're just paying down in total, in which case it's very difficult to exclude interest. It's not that important. But generally, if you're using a system where you have distinguished between the principal sum owing and the interest owing, then okay, fine, use the principal sum. But if you're using a system like the one we're now promoting, where interest is added at the beginning, you can't very easily exclude it. So if I was going to be honest, I would change that, and I would show this. Okay. Oh, I think I messed up. No, I haven't really messed up, but let me just. Okay, there we are. Okay, so let's carry on. Okay, I'm going to leave the question of interest out because it doesn't really matter, because even if the interest is included or excluded, as you get through the cycle, profits are vastly greater than the interest that remains outstanding, and so it doesn't really affect the end result. So I'm just leaving it like that. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Right, next. Number of loans outstanding, the total number of loans that have not yet been repaid in full. I think we're clear on that, right? Right, next. Now, the second page, net part, loans and savings continued. Write-offs this cycle. Now, a write-off is it's an interesting issue because first of all, let's talk about why a loan could be written off. Can anybody suggest why a loan might be written off? Anybody like to hazard a guess? Why would you write off a loan? No volunteers?
I think like if a member dies, then there's no reason to for that member to repay the loan again.
Yes, I mean, a write-off basically means the group has decided, for whatever reason, they're not going to get their money back.
Yes.
Okay. Now, somebody could be thrown into jail. It could be the chief of the village who just refuses to pay and nobody has any way of forcing him to pay. It could be death. It doesn't really matter. It's when a group says, look, we're not going to get this money back, and that is a write-off. By the way, that is a cumulative figure during the cycle. Now, normally a group does not write off a loan until the share out, because they always hope they're going to get the money back. But at the share out, they have to say it's not going to come back because you need to know what is the net amount you have to share out. Okay, and if the money's not there, it's not there. So at that time, usually, that's when a loan is declared delinquent, not just delinquent, but unrecoverable. And it's usually at the time of share out. Next, loan fund cash in box. Okay, this does not include money in the social fund or any other funds like education funds. It is strictly what is in the loan fund available for lending. Then we have bank balance. I think this is the total value of all loanable funds held with a financial institution by the group. The group may have taken, whoops, pardon me, let me just go back. The group may have deposited excess money to a bank, and they say, right, that's our bank balance is our bank balance. And so as long as you're looking at money that has come from the loan fund, that's fine. But if they mix it up together with money they may have from other activities they're doing, then it becomes a bit of a problem. You need to know how much money has been deposited to the bank from the loan fund, okay? It's usually fairly simple, but that's a caveat. In social fund balance, cash held by the group, exclusively used for non-lending purposes, usually for social support. In a social fund bag, you have a like loan fund cash is usually in a bag, and a social fund is in a bag so that it is physically separated. Then we have property now. So here we were talking about. So the value of all physical property owned by the group at the time of data collection, valued according to its purchase price. Now, the point is, let me explain this. Some people say, well, why aren't you depreciating? Or why aren't you appreciating? Certain assets like grain held in storage may have appreciated in price. And the reason is, if you're talking about depreciation and you're talking about appreciation, you're guessing. You don't know for sure. Okay, the only thing you can hold on to is what you paid for it. So the question then is, well, you know, okay, but then how does it get resolved how do I know finally whether the asset increased or decreased in value? And that's really simple. It's when you sell it. Then the cash comes in is the cash that comes in, and that automatically lets you know whether or not you gained or you lost. But you don't complicate the life of the field officer by saying, calculate the value of property now, taking appreciation or depreciation into account. Avoid it like the plague. It's too complicated. And it, as I say, it is guesswork. Next, external debts. Okay, now normally an external debt would be something like a loan. Bank the group could be borrowing money from a bank. It could be that, let's take the example of furniture. Perhaps the group bought a table and some chairs from a carpenter, but they didn't have any money to pay for it at the time, and so they owed that individual the money for the table and chairs. So it is whatever debts the group has, whether it's to a bank or whether it's to individuals. In total, what is the total amount of money that the group is owing? Now, next. Dividends and share out. This is a tricky one. Dividends paid this cycle. This does not apply to savings groups that share out at the end of the cycle. And it is not to be confused with the money a group shares out. If a group is sharing out at the end of its annual cycle, this figure will always be 0. It is only included to allow Indian self-help groups to use the MIS. Okay, now, some people confuse dividends with the share out. It's nothing like that at all. A dividend is profit, just profit, a part of the profits that are paid to a group. Like at the end of a year, a cooperative may declare a profit and then say we're paying a certain amount out to members as their share of the profits. Okay, now savings groups don't do this. So we want you to ignore that and always put a 0 in there. Okay, unless you're an organization like PACT, which never shares out, but in fact does pay dividends. But for nearly all groups, or nearly all savings groups are time bound and they do share out, in which case you never ever fill out dividends. Okay. Okay. Now, if you go to India and you're dealing with Indian self-help groups, they never share out. They always only pay dividends. So in that case, this is what you would use. Finally, is this an end of cycle share out meeting? The answer is very simple. It's either yes or no. Is it a meeting in which money is shared out? End of cycle. So you just put a circle around yes or no, depending upon what the case may be. Okay, so that basically finishes it. But what I want to do is to look at, I'm going to put something else up on the screen. Bear with me a moment. Where are we? Yes. Okay. 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 So what we sent to you, we sent you this. Where we went through what the empty sheet looks like and what the filled sheet looks like. And then we have the empty data collection form and we have the filled data collection form. And then we follow that with explanatory notes. So you've got 24 different data points, and this is divided into various sections. This section, for example, is static data. Okay. Then this section is cycle data. And, hold on, you should put that down there. This is regular data collected usually once every quarter. And it has 2 parts. Hold on, I'm going to push that to a second page. Okay. And it shows the 24 different items. So if you're in doubt about any of these terms used in the data collection form here, you have a reference document that you can look at. This document is included in the guide that we are going to send to you, which is the total MIS setup guide. But this is what you need to fully understand what the data is all about. Now, let me just save that. Save. All right, good. Now, I'm just showing you what the resource is for what I've just gone through. You've also got the PowerPoint, but you might find this a bit more useful when you have time to print it out and set it down, and then you can put the printed page here next to the page here that you're looking at and refer across and see how it's actually used, okay? So now I've completed the briefing on data collection. So I'd like now to open it up to any questions you may have that I can answer that aren't clear already.
Hugh, there's a question from Victor. Let's say a group decides to move or disintegrate like the nomadic or pastoral communities do to search for pasture. What will happen in terms of profit sharing mid-cycle?
Well, there is no, well, normally, this is a very interesting question, because if a group is sharing out its money, then let's be very clear. profit sharing means they're continuing on with their activity, but they're giving out profit halfway through, in which case that's a dividend. Okay? But if they're basically saying, okay, we're going to stop activities now, that's it, we're halfway through a cycle, then it is an end of cycle share out meeting. Then it may reconfigure and set up a new cycle, a separate cycle. So anytime there is a complete share out of the group's money, then that represents the end of the cycle. Any other questions? I'm going to, hold on a second, I'm going to stop sharing screens. Okay, then I'm back in. Okay, any other questions?
There was another question. This is from Lillian. Actually, she sent, it says, I like the new form you've trained us on today. We would like to implement it. Where is the worksheet found in SAVIX?
Sorry?
I like the new form you have trained us on today. We would like to implement it. Where is the worksheet found in SAVIX?
You're talking about the data collection form?
I believe so.
I assume. It isn't. It is not in SAVIX per se. The data collection, you'll see this when we actually do data entry. The data collection form is set up in such a way that when you collect data and then you take it to the data entry person, the screen, the actual software, follows exactly the same sequence and it uses exactly the same terms. So once you've filled out that data collection form, you switch on your computer, you go to the data entry screen, and you tap in the data in exactly the same sequence as it appears on your data collection form. Your data collection form, however, there is no data collection form in printable form in SAVIX. It is in this manual. So the one I've just shown you, the blank one I've just shown you, is your data collection form. And by the way, one thing, you should print it on both sides. You should have the static data on one side and then the cycle and standard data on the other side, because you never know when you go out whether you're going to be entering group data on a new group or a group that's already existing. But you print it out. So what I've shown you in terms of, let me show you again. Let's go there. Let's see, where do I find it? Okay, here we are. Basically, the answer is very simple. It is you print out, on one side of the form you print out this, okay? And on the other side of the form you print out this. Okay, the whole page, and that's it. That's your data collection form. So it doesn't come from the software, the SAVIX software. It comes from a hard copy printout of these materials.
So she's talking about the savings per member part.
Yep. Okay, let's go there. Let's take a look at it. Let me share again. Okay, right, here we are. Share. Right, savings per member, yes. What's the question?
She just likes the form. So if she likes the form, she could just basically copy this.
Yeah.
To use it for her organization, right?
Yeah, this has been developed specifically as a hard copy printout. Okay, and by the way, one thing I'd like to say is we've noticed that a number of organizations have field officers who fill in all the data, then don't bother with the in-field profit calculation. If they don't fill that in, you should reject the form, because it means that they didn't calculate whether the group was making a profit or a loss, and therefore they had very limited means of validating the data. So you should demand that the in-field profit calculation is filled out.
So
should be, yeah, go ahead.
So she wants to know where do I enter the information in SAVIX? Where do I enter the savings per member in the SAVIX?
Oh, you'll get there. Okay, I mean, please don't worry. Okay, because the only thing I'm focusing on in this webinar is what is the data? How do you fill out the data collection form? We're having another webinar in a week's time, and I'm actually going to be entering data on a group. And then your exercise will be to fill in data for 18 groups. Okay, so you get real familiarity with entering data. Okay,
And these forms are in the current excerpt of the manual, which is at the beginning of Module 4, correct?
Right. Yes, there is, it might be, I mean, okay, let me show you. I normally have, let's have a look, where are we? Okay, where is it? Simon, module 4. Oh, sorry, just a minute. Simon, no, sorry. I actually do have an Excel file which I use to create a Word file. I copy it as an image and I print it. What I might do is include or send to everybody a copy of the Excel template that I use for data. Data collection. Okay, just a minute. I may be able to find it right now. I don't know where I put it actually.
Actually, here you've just reminded me that in face-to-face workshops, we do actually give that out.
I do, yes.
So if you send it to me, I'll email it to everybody.
Sorry?
If you send it to me, I'll email it to everybody.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, I'll do that. I'll send you the actual template. I mean, I've got it, and I've just you put me on the spot a bit to figure out where I've got it right now, but I do have it. Okay.
No problem.
Wait a minute, modules. Okay. Yeah, let me just do it. Let me not waste time doing it now, but I'll send it to you momentarily. Okay.
So, are we close to wrapping up? Because I have a few final comments once we
Let's just see if there's any more comments from people, and then we can.
Any other questions? I'm just going to scan through and go back, see if I missed any that were up above. No, I think, are there any other questions from anybody listening, watching? All right, I think we're good on the questions. So just a few important things you might have noticed in the email I sent to you is that next webinar is a week from today. We've been doing these webinars generally every 2 weeks, but we're moving a little faster now, as I said in the beginning of the webinar. So you will be having another webinar 1 week from today, which is going to be the 18th of June, same time. And then there will be that will be the second webinar of Module 4. And then Module 5 will launch on June 25th, which is 2 weeks from today. So we have 3 webinars in a row, week after week. So please pay attention. Most of you who are on this call, or in this Zoom event, have been doing well with your keeping up with your assignments. Some of you need to go back to the earlier assignments from Module 1 and finish those up. Some are missing. And everything is kind of counted towards your grade, so we want to make sure that you're current on everything. But generally, we're in good shape. Also remember to complete the short verification and post it that says you're at the webinar, because that's part of your attendance. The attendance is part of your overall grade, so please remember to do that. And as usual, Hugh and Andrew are available to answer any questions you might have related to what you learned today, or the assignment and discussion that are up on Canvas. And I'm able to answer any other questions related to anything else. So thank you very much for your attendance. I'm sorry we were not able to get Andrew in as the facilitator today. He had some technical difficulties and finally was able to join us. But hopefully he'll be facilitating a future event. And thank you everybody again. And we'll see you all 1 week from today at the Part 2 Module 4 webinar. So,
yeah, one thing I'd like to point out, Bill, on that is that it won't be a 1.5 hour meeting. It'll be less than an hour.
Okay. So when I send out the notice for next week, I will note that it'll be less than an hour. And this recording will be up later today. So, all right, Andrew, any parting words from you?
Yes, just to say that As Bill has said, most of you have done your assignment. I think there's one person who's going in today to finish it, which is good. We still have two others who haven't done it, but information has already gone out that we need to actually finish this assignment, because if you don't complete your setup assignment, you won't be able to do the data entry. But the good news is that most of you by now have done it. You responded quite well to our frantic efforts to get you to do that. And now as we go forward, please note that we are actually coming to a very high climax, and we need to actually be consistent. Let's do that so that we finish on a high note. And if you have any pending assignments, it's good for you to get that behind you so that you don't feel left behind. Thank you very much.
We are having a virtual graduation at the end of the sequence of this course, including handing out virtual certificates, and in some cases, if you want to, I could mail you an actual certificate, but that's why I needed to get your names so that we can make sure we have it correct on your certificate. So we want to make sure we keep the momentum going. We appreciate everybody's attention. We know you're really busy with other things, but this is a very powerful and useful software to your savings group work. So we're glad that you're sticking with it and you're contributing to the assignments and asking good questions. So, all right. Without further ado, thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you 1 week from today. This will be the end of the broadcast.
Bye, everybody.